Good evening, everybody. My name's Jenny Pearson. Welcome to our webinar tonight, Bush GP Relocation Grants launch. Before we go any further, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on tonight and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. We have a great array of speakers for you tonight, and our first speaker is Melissa Collins, who's from the Primary Health Network. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Jenny. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for attending our webinar tonight, launching our Bush GP Relocation Grants and our Recruitment Starter Grants. Jenny, are you right to present? Lovely. So I'd like to just take everyone through the Bush GP grant round and what that consists of, and give everyone a little bit of history and context of where we've come from with this particular initiative. And then just sort of, it will provide some context around the speakers that we have tonight. So the PHN is really pleased and excited to launch our Bush G relocation grants and our starter recruitment grants. Obviously, we've long recognised, everyone has recognised that primary care workforce supply is a real issue out in our region. So rather than continuing to do the same thing, we're really trying to look at an innovative solution to help practices out there recruit some new GPs into the region. Jenny, if you could move to the next slide, please. So this initiative is based loosely on quite a successful program that we've run on the central coast of New South Wales, which is quite similar. They were called Sea Change Grants. Obviously, that's not relevant for our rural regions, so we've called these Bush GP grants. And essentially, they consist of three components to this grant round. So the first one is a recruitment starter grant. So that's $2,500. That's available for everyone that's attending tonight. And with that small grant, what we hope that general practices will use that for is to fund recruitment activities and to enhance their recruitment activities. And so that could be looking at your advertising, which James is going to give us some fabulous tips on. It could be looking at maybe enhancing your website so that you're appealing to more potential GPs. You could use that towards recruitment services such as Jessica. You could decide to put together a specialised recruitment video, which quite a few of the practices that have received this grant before have done with great results. So it's going to be really simple for everyone to receive. We'll be sending a link out to you tomorrow where you'll literally just need to log on, provide your details and a supply form and an invoice, and then the PHN will provide that grant to you. So we're really hoping it's just it's a small little kickstart to any new recruitment activity that you might have, and we hope that you'll be really inspired by tonight's presentations to have some new ideas and maybe a different way of doing your recruiting. Thanks, Jenny. Next slide. So the main component of the Bush GP relocation grants are our Bush GP grants. So we're pleased to announce that we have 6 $25,000 grants available. And to qualify for the grant, a general practice must secure a new GP, and that's from outside our PHN region, which we'll be able to provide a link for you so you can understand what that encompasses, or convert a current registrar, last year registrar, to a permanent GP role in your town. This will be available at this point to the first 6 general practices who secure a new GP who will receive the $25,000 grant. So just a little bit around eligibility. The GPs must make a 2-year commitment to work in the general practice, and that should be around 3 days per week. The payment breakdown will be $15,000 on signing of a contract and for the GP to commence in the role, and then a further $10,000 after the GP has been in the role for 6 months. The next slide, please, Jen. So these grants are to be used as an incentive for the general practice to offer to the GP essentially. So the grant actually goes to the general practice. It doesn't go to the individual GP, but it will be up to the general practice owners and principals to decide how they might use that grant. And there are a few ways that they can be used. They can be used to supplement wages or enhance leave entitlements. I know of a case on the Central Coast where a relocating GP, their first few weeks of income was supplemented so that it was a very easy transition for them. You might look to perhaps support your new GP with some initial rent or mortgage repayments for 3 months. You may look to do some support them by paying some of their professional fees or professional development. Or in fact, you can actually use the grant to subsidise any funding, any expenditure you might have had with recruitment, advertising, and/or contracting. So it is fairly broad, but I would ask you if you have any questions, please contact me and I can talk you through that. Next slide, please, Jen. So the way these have been working really well on the Central Coast is we've had an allocation of grants, and what I've asked each practice is, once they've gone out to market and they're feeling like they're getting some really good traction or some really good conversations with a potential GP, please get in touch with me, and what we can do then is allocate a provisional grant for you. Now we understand, you know, contract negotiations are complex and people's circumstances sometimes change. So what we'd like to do is make sure we allocate you a grant so then you can go back to the GP with certainty to say, if you come on board, we've got access to this grant and we can assist you in A, B or C, so that you've got that little bit of certainty in your negotiation. So then once you contact me, we can then talk through the process of securing the grant and the documentation provided. And it's quite simple documentation, things like a contract, some evidence of MBS billing, etc., etc. So if all is in order, then we can award the grant for you to use with your new GP. And as I said before, the grant is awarded to the general practice, not to the GP, but it is at the discretion of the general practice on how they'd like to use that. Next slide, please, Jenny. So an exciting addition to this particular grant round, which we didn't do in the Central Coast, is our Welcome Ambassador grants. And Amy Kelly from Big Sky Relocation will talk a little bit more about that. But we're really excited to offer every grant recipient a package of a Welcome Ambassador service, and these are worth up to $10,000. So to qualify for the service, the practice must be eligible for the grant and have a signed contract with the GP. And again, it'll be the first 6 general practices at this point to secure a new GP. And the service will be customised to each GP and their families. And Amy will go into some more detail regarding that. So it's an exciting new initiative, and that's really recognising that relocating out to sometimes small towns or rural areas, you know, GPs and their families might need some support to settle in and really embed themselves in the community. So we think this is a great new initiative. Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so we've got some eligibility for the Bush GP grants and the Welcome Ambassador grants. And this is really recognising that it is really difficult to recruit to some of the smaller towns and locations across our region. So on the screen here, we have the LGAs that are eligible for the relocation grant, and practices within Tamworth are not eligible for those larger Bush GP incentive grants at this stage, but they are eligible for the recruitment grants, because we understand that everyone could use a hand with their recruitment activities. But I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that either tomorrow or after the session tonight. Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so our closing dates for the recruitment starter grants, which is the $2,500 grant that will be closing in approximately a month, so the 15th of April. So I encourage you all to jump online in the next few days and fill out that simple form so we can organise that payment for you. And the Bush GP grants will run through to the 30th of June. So we're hoping by that time we can at least secure 6 more new GPs for our region. Just to give you an indication, with the Central Coast, we're up to about 11 or 12 new GPs, with some more on the books as well. So next slide, Jen, I think that might be it. Oh no, next steps. So tomorrow I'll be sending an email out to you all with a link to be able to apply for the Recruitment Starter Grant. There'll be a link to a People Bank and website page. There'll be some more information around the entire grant round, and then also a link to other potential sources of funding a practice might be eligible to access. Potentially, as you know, RDN have also a range of grants, and there are other ranges of grants that can be available for rural and regional practices. So we'll have a link to an information page where you can actually work through that as well. So by the time you combine the PHN grants and some of those other grants, it can actually add up to quite a substantial package that hopefully you'll be able to offer to some potential GPs. And of course, it'll have my details for any questions. So I'm the grants manager at the PHN, and I'll be here to answer any questions that you might have and work through, you know, the process of applying for the grants. So thanks for your time. I will answer some questions, but we'll leave it to the end of the session. So I really want to make sure that we have time to listen to our guest speakers today, because they've got a wealth of information that will be really useful in the recruitment activities. So thanks for your time, and I'll hand back to you, Jen. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks very much. Our next speaker is James Wiggins. James is from Engaged Associates, and he is an employer brand consultant. I'm just going to share your screen, James. Oh. James, I seem to have lost you. Just hold on one moment. Jessica, are you there?
Yes. Sorry.
James has just sent me an email, and he's having issues with his internet. He's just trying to reset it. So if you're ready to go, we might go ahead with you.
Oh,
your
yes.
presentation.
Is it okay for you to operate the slides?
Absolutely. Yes, I will do that. Let me just might be 1 second. I'll just bring them up. Sorry, everybody. The joys of technology. There we go. Now, before we start, I'll just introduce you. So Jessica is going to be our next speaker. Jessica is the founder of Trust Medical Recruitment and has been consulting exclusively for general practice recruitment for the last 12 years. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you, Jenny. Yes, so I've been doing this for 12 years and I'm still very passionate about it. I guess the great improvement that we've had of recent is that the government have opened up a lot of DPA areas. So the New England area is completely a DPA, and it's also classified as a MMM3 location, which means that a lot of the doctors coming into the area are eligible for the training programs such as the MD-RAT, the More Doctors for Rural Australia program, and the RACGP PEP program, in addition to many of the other programs, but they tend to be the most popular at the moment that the doctors are looking to train on. Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so here's a map of the region. So we've got the goal here, of course, for any practice is to attract a vocationally registered general practitioner. They get the highest Medicare rebates, they're fully qualified, however, they're also in high demand. So the other candidates that I would prompt people to consider are general registrants and also international medical graduates, because they do commit long term. General registrants are a benefit because of their hospital experience, and obviously they need less supervision in place for them. Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so here I've just listed a few benefits of working with a recruiter such as myself. So it's creating an external relationship with a professional, so somebody who you can confidently outsource to. We allocate all of our time to trying to find you a doctor. Of course, there's many people out there at the moment who are looking for doctors, but if we have all the correct information for your practice and we have a tight relationship with you, we will always do our best to service you. A second point is that you're utilising and accessing the knowledge that we have and the insight on the current market. And my thoughts on the current market at the moment, it's one I haven't seen in a very long time. Basically, because of the border closures, the international border closures for the last two years, although they've allowed doctors to come in and go through exemptions and quarantine, it's been very slow, and that has had a knock-on effect on IMGs coming in and subsequently training up to a higher level. So we're kind of got a 2.5 year backlog there. However, on the positive, all these new programs have come out from the college where general registrants can come out of the hospital market and into general practice. So that's been really beneficial. And in regards to vocationally registered doctors, I feel like there's maybe a little bit of faith being lost in the local market because of the borders opening and closing and being mostly closed. So a lot of vocationally registered doctors have looked to route down and stay in one place. So that's a bit of an oversight for you there. So the other benefit of working with a recruiter is you just extend your access to candidates, because we are signed up to using extensive advertising campaigns and networks, and you can collect more of a range of candidates that way. We also tap into passively seeking doctors, so that could be doctors who we've known over the years and we followed their career progress, and they may be looking for that move. And you don't always pick those doctors up from having an advert live, or going through and just one agency. So that's a pretty good way. Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so here's a little flow chart of how to build a relationship with a recruiter. So I would say establish a strong relationship. Consider us as a professional in your affairs, such a real estate agent or a mortgage broker, just as some equivalent examples. Especially the experienced ones. We really do like to help and care about your situation. Get to know the allocated recruiter a little bit more and build a long-standing, relationship with them. So the best way to do that is by putting them in touch with a key person in your team. So that could be a long-standing, consistent practice manager or the practice principal. What we notice is that in larger practice organisations, they have one GP who is long-standing, who's allocated the role of dealing with the recruitment agent, and that works really well. So be really clear on the aim. So, when we get a candidate in, we want you to be on the forefront of our minds so that we can always send you that doctor to review. So that really does mean keeping in touch regularly. A lot of the time we work by email and obviously phones, but because we can't always access you because you're consulting or practice managers are busy, we keep our communication in email, and that's also for record keeping as well. But as modern day has evolved, we have text messages and even WhatsApp on our phones, and that allows us to respond quickly and promptly to clients and also doctors. So that's the best methods to keep in touch. But I've just put there as a joke, please don't fax. Provide us with information is the next step. So we really need juicy, detailed information on your practice. The more we know you inside out, the better. We want to know dynamic and the way the practice is formed, the hierarchy, what's different about you. So please go into those details and write it down or keep a brief so that we can refer to that. Internally, we will keep that on file against our database, and we use that information to, provide doctors with more details or write a job ad. So that's a really important step. Terms of business. So all agencies have a terms of business. Most of them like to be signed prior to arranging candidates. With myself, I tend to send the terms out with the GP CV so that you can refer to them. And yeah, that's really important to check and sign off on the terms of business to make sure that you're happy with those. And just the last step there, working together. Don't go with lots and lots of agencies. I really find that confusing. The doctors get confused, the candidates get confused, and although more may be better, it is a lot to keep up with. And the recruiters can pick up on a lack of exclusivity there. Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so here's some signs of a good recruitment agent. Knowledge on the market. So unfortunately in recruitment, there is a lot of turnover with staff. A lot of corporate agencies have high sales targets, and if the recruitment consultant isn't meeting those, isn't making their placements, they are usually out. So being in the corporate world for a few years before I started Trust Medical Recruitment, I experienced that firsthand, not by being kicked out, but by seeing people come and go. So, really do find someone who knows what they're talking about. They need to know all the rules. There's so many rules and regulations with the Medicare provider numbers, APRA, and here at Trust Medical, we have an end-to-end service. So what that means is we receive the candidate CV, we do all of the paperwork throughout the process, apart from migration, to make sure that we are providing you with a service, complete service, not just finding you a doctor, but we're doing the paper trail as well. Listening. You need someone who's really going to listen and tune into you and not talk away, although that might feel what I'm doing now. But yes, really listen to what you're saying and the culture of the clinic and all of those tiny details that make you unique. You want somebody also who's going to follow up and get back to you, so that if you have said, for example, yes, we want to interview them, or you've had an interview, you get some feedback and you want to know whether it went ahead positively or negatively and what you can do better the next time, and likewise just to have your ends tied up. A lot of clients complain that they never heard back from a recruiter, so that is a really good sign. So a very important factor is that we are always considering your clinic for, you know, those new candidates that are coming in. At the moment, I would say it's a candidate-led market. So there are so many jobs out there since the government opened up the DPA locations basically to everywhere that wasn't a metropolitan centre. So it's highly competitive. So if we have that contact with you, you will be considered as a priority and we will allocate those doctors to you at the forefront. Make sure your recruitment agent is doing background checks. So that's the first stage of the paperwork. So reference checks, APRA checks if applicable, and patient reviews that we can access now online. Next slide, please, Jenny. Okay, so what to include in your information to the recruiter. So this is really important. Most recruiters do provide you with a template practice profile if you need one. We certainly do. But we need you to go into details about the job, the practice and the work environment, even the earning capacity and the figures, because GPs aren't paid a salary per se. They want to know roughly how much they may make per month or per annum. So that's a really important one. Where is the practice? So what's the location? Even things like patient access, transport. What can they do in the area or even on their lunch break? What attractions are available for the doctor? Aspects like what the consult rooms are like, you know, do they have a window or natural lights, plants? Are they modern? Is it friendly? There's some really impressive clinics out there and some really bad ones as well. So that's important to improve on or make beautiful for the doctors who are going to work in them all day long. What sort of practice is it? So is it a corporate, a family practice? Is it doctor owned? You know, what's the hierarchy? That's very important for people. The doctors also like to know how many other doctors are working there. Sometimes it might be if they have a special interest in, let's say, women's health, they want to make sure that they're not one of 10 female doctors providing that, you know, they want to stand out. That's an important side of things. The staff, the nurses, the allied health, the reception, the manager, and how long they've been there. That's all tying into the team dynamic. You know, do you guys go out? Are you social? Do you have birthday parties or cake in the tea room? Do you do annual events for team building? That's all really important for integration. And of course, any unique selling points. What makes you stand out from the crowd is going to win that doctor over. And next slide, please, Jenny. Okay, so here's a few extra pieces of information that the GP candidates always want to know, in my experience. So flexibility of hours. This is really important for the female doctors who have families, but also the modern day males who want a bit more work-life balance. The shifts, so are there weekend shifts available or after hours? Is there any on-call on the roster at the hospital so they can be a VMO? All those aspects are important. Things like aged care if they want to increase their salary capacity, what the billing type is. So is it bulk, private, mixed, and what is the ratio if it's mixed? The existing staff, so what do they like? Have they been there very long, and who is who? Really important to introduce that virtually to the doctors. Offer a site visit or even a virtual tour with modern day technology. That's not too hard, and James will go into that later. But that will allow them to get a bit of a feel for it. The doctor practice principles, who are they and what's their history? What have they got to offer as a legacy in terms of knowledge and mentoring, and do they want to even retire or slow down? Would there be an opportunity ahead for the new doctor in this regard to be more than just a GP? They could be associate or a partner. What training and educating is offered at the practice? Next slide, please, Jenny. Okay, so this is just a quick one on recruiter contracts in terms of business. So just check out the corporate versus boutique agencies, what they are requesting from you in the terms of business. We sometimes offer flexible payment options for the practices because, especially if it's a vocationally registered doctor, we want you to make sure they're going to be happy and settle into the area. Also consider offering the doctors maybe a trial, so a temporary contract into a permanent arrangement. So for example, come and do a 3-month locum or a 6-month locum with the look to extend. This is quite a common offer that we're seeing for people who might be thinking about making a permanent sea change, but they're not quite sure. Next slide, please, Jen. So just here we've got GP contracts and what to consider. So when offering a doctor a contract, I would recommend for it to be attractive and flexible. A lot of the time from doctors, we even get asked for no contracts, just a letter of offer to be considered, because they don't like to be locked in long term. But I think from the grant that's available, that will need to be defined as a minimum commitment there. But it is something to consider as well for a locum or a long-term locum. Partnerships and associate considerations. So that's for the doctor who's looking for a little bit more than just being an additional GP. You know, is there the space for them to become part of the practice and give a bit more back? That would be attractive for their career progression. And then, you know, it is more than a percentage. What is the income? Can you offer an income guarantee for the first 3 or 6 months? That might tie in really well with the grant. It would also offer the GP a sense of security. Can you give them a rough ballpark on the remuneration potential that they're going to earn at the practice? I usually suggest to keep expectations in the low to mid range, because it is definitely all down to the individual doctor and how they can build their practice within a practice. But on the same note, it's important to let them know how much they could earn, how many patients they can expect to see. Can you foster an educator in the new doctor so that they can then train new doctors, new junior doctors and registrars? We need more of those in Australia. And also, I'd highly recommend offering to market the individual on their subspeciality. So if they have a clinical interest in a certain area, to push that and to advertise that on the website or any marketing material that you may use once they've joined. And next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so this is something I'd really endorse you to consider, is employing an international medical graduate. We have assisted hundreds of international medical graduates over into Australia from countries like Sri Lanka, Iran, India, Pakistan, the UK, Ireland, Canada. They do have so much value in the sense that although it can be tough supporting them and providing them with that level supervision, they do have a slow start, but after that they will commit to you, you know, for a 4 or 5 year period is the going rate these days. And it can be a fantastic solution to a practice who wants security and is working on their recruitment retention. So it's something to have going on in the background, even if your primary goal is to secure a vocationally registered or a general registered doctor. To have an IMG lining up 1 or 2 is also a great strategy, and it works really well. The practices who I see flourish are the ones actually doing that, as long as they can provide the supervision, of course. So I've just put there some points. They have to pass the PESCI. They need visa sponsorship. We can help you with a migration agent to arrange that. They need a bit of support settling into the area, and they need to adjust to practicing medicine in the Australian context. Next slide, please, Jen. Oh, okay, sorry. So I'm extending this about international medical graduates here. So the more benefits in your area, which is an MMM3, they can attract the higher Medicaid rebate, so they can get the same as a VR doctor, the A1 rebate. They usually sign a 4 to 5 year agreement. They build rapport in the first 6 months of consulting because they're spending that one-to-one time with the patients as they're going through the supervision levels. They are really moldable and willing to learn, especially the younger ones, I find, and people like them for that. They have up-to-date general practice experience, so they're coming straight from their job in, let's say, Iran over to Australia, and there's a very small gap, whereas getting a doctor from a hospital hasn't actually practiced usually GP before, and so you are having another adjustment there. So they're definitely worth considering. Onshore international medical graduates can have hospital experience and sometimes a bit of GP experience from their home country, but not always. So it's worth checking that on the CV. There's lots of grants available for training, supervision, and development for them. And most can attempt their fellowship exams after 12 months in the position. So, and there's multiple training programs available, as you would know. Next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so in conclusion, some funnies here. Recruitment put-offs is don't use too many agencies. And then the biggest one is not providing enough information on the position. And next slide, please, Jen. Okay, so here at Trust Medical, we love helping medical centres find suitable doctors. Communication tips, just keep in touch and provide us with as much information as you can. We have some templates to send to you if you need prompts. Focus on area, location and lifestyle, and explore your community and what it has to offer doctors. And you know, we are here to help you. It's not just about the bottom line. And endlessly advertising on Seek, we are passionate about assisting practices with their workforce. The next slide, please, Jen. And here are my contact details. If anybody needs any help, we're always happy to assist you. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and have enjoyed listening to James.
Thanks, Jess, so much. And we will have a copy of the slides and the presentation in our education library. So you'll be able to look up all of Jess's details if you need to contact her. So I think we're right with James now. So yes, lovely.
Great. Thank you very much.
You.
Okay. So look, thank you for joining the webinar. And I guess that probably one of the things that I wanted to start off with is that in my 20 years in recruitment advertising and employment marketing, I've seen a lot of advertising habits play out that just aren't effective. And I've conducted a lot of research among candidates and leaders, including across the health sector. So this evening, I do want to share a few tips and tools around advertising, but I also wanted to possibly change your mindset around what you're actually doing when you're advertising a job. I've typically found that it's that initial mindset that leads to a lot of people and organizations astray when they're trying to stand out as an employer. So I guess the first mistake, and it's a mindset change, is really moving from a process of making candidates prove they're good enough to a process of selling how good you are. And that changes everything, both in what the ad messages you communicate and what media channels you use or invest in to communicate them. And this is particularly true in candidate short markets, which of course the health market, the health candidate market is. And I guess the whole reason for advertising in the first place is to change beliefs and behaviors, not just to announce the existence of something like a job. The whole reason you advertise is because great candidates are not right now beating your door down. So the reason they aren't beating your door down is because they believe somewhere else is better for them or their careers. So your advertising needs to change that belief. The purpose of the advertising is not to get a candidate to join you. Its purpose is to change the beliefs of ideal candidates enough for them to want to find out more and contact you, where that human interaction is what will be the decider on whether they join you or not. So I guess this evening, I do want to talk about, think about what you're actually advertising when you advertise. Cover some writing ad tips. Look at websites and website content, video, as was mentioned earlier, but also look at social media and how you can actually engage in that fairly simply but effectively. So I guess what I wanted to start off with, as I mentioned, is start looking at what you're actually advertising when you're advertising a job. And one of the ideas that I like you to think about is that when you're advertising a job, you're advertising an experience, not a thing. And when people buy an experience, it's a much more complex decision-making process than when they buy a simple object. So this means that well before you begin to even write a job ad, there's a bit of preparation you should do first. So it means you should be prepared for a range of conversations about that complex range of things that are important to a candidate in making a job decision. Now, some of those conversations you'll have face-to-face or by video with candidates. For example, doing a job interview. But some you'll actually codify into the job ads that you write, and others in the employment marketing activities like videos. So your job ad is a conversation. Your website is a conversation. These are not just one-way information packages. So I guess to get you started to think about some of those conversations, I wanted to share the screenshot from a conference board research that was conducted well over a decade ago now. But I think that what's interesting to consider are the broad range of categories of what they found motivated talent. And a lot of these things are their experiences, they're aspects of the experiences that people have in jobs. So this is where all of the things that Jessica outlined in her presentation about what to let a recruiter know become really important to also include in your communications in advertising to attract great candidates. So there's additional research that was actually done fairly recently in Australia around what GPs particularly value at work in a job. I just wanted to look at the top 3 things here: variety, culture of practice, and that longitudinal care. So, you know, how well do I actually get to know my patients and their families? So to be honest, in just about every job ad for GPs I've ever read, none of them talk about this. They may talk a little bit about the culture of the practice, but usually it's in terms of this is what our values are. But you really need to actually communicate that more in terms of how it connects to what your ideal GP candidates are looking for. So if I move on to writing ads, so here are 2 examples of job ads. The one on the left is what I would call a fairly typical ad that, as I mentioned before, is really trying to get candidates to prove that they're good enough. You know, an exciting opportunity awaits a caring and dedicated general practitioner to join a hardworking team. You know, we're looking for general practitioners who are dedicated to providing high quality care. And then the core values. Now, I don't know about you, but you probably don't want to recruit GPs who are not caring and dedicated. You probably don't want to over stress that they will be working hard and joining a hard-working team. You know, you don't want a GP who's not dedicated to providing high-quality care. So this is a problem because in a way you're telling your candidates things that they already know. You're not changing any beliefs. You're not changing any attitudes towards you or your practice. The ad on the right, though, it talks more specifically to the sorts of things that might be more relevant to a good candidate. Join a beautifully, fully private billing practice in an affluent suburb. You know, established patient lists, established, you know, for a long time. A very large patient following. You know, a purpose-built environment that's light, spacious, well-equipped. Large consult rooms, you know, super enthusiastic and passionate and professional colleagues. So these are the sort of things, you know, that both you should avoid doing because they don't tell anything that's either relevant to the candidate or that they know already to something that they may not know about you and something that they will be looking for because it will stand out in the ads that you write. So when you do write the ads, I guess things to think about before you even start writing. What's going to be relevant and important to your ideal GP? What sort of backgrounds do they have that you need to be aware of that maybe you can contrast in your ads? What are they looking for that they don't have now that maybe they can find in your practice? How do my targets process information? What value can I actually offer my targets? And how can I turn that value into a benefit? And we'll have a quick look at some of those. How can I change their current behavior? Because at the moment, you know, they may be thinking, I don't want to work anywhere outside of Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane. How do I change that behavior by linking what they're looking for in a job, in a career, to what you're offering? And of course, what's my budget? That dictates a lot of, you know, what you can actually do in terms of video production or how widely you can advertise. So in gathering the information beforehand, as I mentioned, gather information about the person you want, but also gather information about your practice, because these are the things that you actually want to connect. What is it about the job or the opportunity in your practice that you think will be a benefit to your ideal candidates? And what do you want them to do? What sort of call to action? I mention this because it may well be that you want people to phone you or you want them to visit your website. Think about how that sort of recruitment process should be playing out to make it more efficient and easier for the candidates. I would always recommend to decide on one main selling benefit, and that basically from the candidate, what's in it for me? Because that'll inform your headline and the very few key points you actually put into the ad. So I would always recommend that you link what you want in a person to what's in your job that you can actually offer. So for example, if you're after an inquisitive thinker, maybe you want to talk about in your ad the variety in practice patients. If you want to attract somebody who's interested in women's health, talk about the established practice and the interest that the practice has in that. So the second thing, write down 3 to 5 things that connect what you want in the candidate to the related benefits. So an example of linking what you want to the benefits, our diverse client base of young families, older families, and aged care residents from both high and low socioeconomic backgrounds will reward your inquisitive mind and give you the variety to keep things interesting. So it's weaving what sort of candidate we want with what can we offer them that will interest that sort of candidate. And again, the same example with the women's health example I mentioned earlier. So some tips in when you're actually writing the ads. Write the ad content first and then write the headline later. I say this because so many people get stuck on the headline. Once you've actually written your ad, your headline will then come to mind when you've actually written down your thoughts and you've joined the benefits with the sort of person you're looking for. The headline usually reveals itself. But when you do write it, keep it short and to the point. But also write short paragraphs, short sentences, and avoid bullet points in your copy because people remember stories, they don't remember lists. Don't rewrite or explain the headline in the opening sentence because your headline is already doing that job for you. But when you're writing the copy in the bulk of the ad, avoid any repetition and keep a sense of a flow or direction in your copy where you're leaning from one benefit to the next as you weave through the copy. Make sure your grammar is informal. Use words that, we or you, keep it in the first person rather than third person, which is quite formal and off-putting. Write the ad as if you're writing it for one person. You'd be surprised how formal most ads are written, and it sounds like they're making a proclamation to all of the GPs in New South Wales, and that really puts people off. Before you do post it, read your copy out aloud, because we use much more informal language when reading out aloud than when we write. So that's a good way to sense check. Read it out aloud to somebody else and ask them if it sounds too stifled or too formal. And in terms of the actual content, if you're in doubt, take it out. Focus on just 2, 3, maybe 4 key things. Don't try to talk about everything. Actually, I might move on. So in terms of, I did a check earlier today. There are actually right now 102 ads for GPs in New South Wales and 608 in all of Australia. Now that means that your headlines need to work hard. So if I look at the very top example here, general practitioner, 75% of the competing job ads on Seek are going to be saying exactly the same thing. Look at that second example, general practitioner, I think, the idea that, there are different aspects about the opportunity that may be initially relevant to your target audience. And the very first paragraph, very quickly, talk about something that's you believe may be one of the key benefits of your practice or a particular thing that's relevant to your ideal targets. I mean, if you look at these two Seek ads, You know, one has a fairly straightforward headline, and it's got a long list of bullet points. It's a bit off-putting. There's a lot of work to work through all of those bullet points. The ad on the right, you know, it's got a welcoming image. It's got fairly simple, short, to the point copy. And one of the things that you can actually do, particularly with your Seek ads, you can embed videos in them. It's much better to have short, focused, written copy, and then a video, ideally 2 minutes or less, that conveys your idea of your employment experience much more effectively, much more engagingly, and much more authentically than words ever will do. Okay, so websites. As I mentioned, websites are a conversation. It's not just information, one-way information that you push out there. You know, the bios of your team are really important, not just for your patients and the families that you want to attract to your practice, but to your candidates. Talk about what your interests are. Talk about the environment that you've created. What's actually in it for a particular type of GP. So here's where I want to, I guess, talk about the sort of content that you might want to think about including on your website. Now, I want to play a video here, and it is a video that's talking about, if you like, the rationale, the purpose behind the creation of this particular practice. But I wanted to play it for you because I think it highlights some of the information that you can include about your practice, why you set it up, what your philosophy is that's really relevant to your ideal candidates. Jenny, do you want to see if we can play this video?
Yes, I will.
Okay, so you can see from there, obviously that video is focusing on patients as a target, but it indicates some of the things that I recommend you actually think about, like before you have these recruitment conversations with potential candidates, so that you can actually help them join the dots between what they're looking for in a job and a career with what you've got to offer. Okay, so when you do develop your own videos, I think that you need to think about these sort of aspirations or fears that your candidates have, and then talk about how your employment experience achieves those or overcomes the fears, but providing evidence, and talk about not just the information, but how it feels for a candidate, a GP, to actually achieve those aspirations or overcome fears in your practice. So what I wanted to share with you is one of the outcomes of one of the clinical practices in regional New South Wales that actually attended an earlier seminar, an earlier webinar, and actually followed this sort of advice. So Jenny, if I can ask you to play this as well, just to see what's possible. Okay, so one of the things that I would always say about videos, or to be honest, any piece of advertising, is to tackle the misconceptions and the knowledge gaps that your ideal candidates have. And so you can see there, that video is actually focusing on this. These are the sort of things that, for example, a metropolitan GP would probably have about working outside of the city, what they wouldn't know, what sort of misconceptions they may have. So I guess I wanted to finish up by looking at social media. Now, social media is actually wonderful for two reasons. I think the first is that it doesn't have to be difficult in terms of identifying the sort of content that you share via social media. I mean, you can see here from your family doctors at Erina, it could be anything from introducing a new GP, actually showing that when people start, they will get a warm welcome. The people here matter. We care about them. To what crazy things are we doing for Easter? It doesn't have to be all about strictly clinical issues, because this gives potential candidates a sense of what your organizational culture is like. It helps them feel, get a feeling for what working for you, working with you might be like. The second thing is that social media is free, and it can go viral as people share it, comment on it, like it. It's a wonderful way of sharing the culture of your practice virally for free. So the last thing I did want to leave with you is, I guess, an idea that a lot of people don't think about when thinking about recruitment advertising or recruitment. And the reality is that recruitment often begins as a retention problem. Once you've actually gone through that sort of exercise about, why us? What's great about the practice? Why would somebody work here? Why would somebody want to pursue their career here? One of the things that we find is people often forget. They forget to kind of reinforce those things with the people who've come to join them. And we human beings, whether you, I don't know if you realize this, but we tend to remember the bad things, the frustrating things, and we forget or we get used to the good things. So, there are lots of things, as I mentioned before, about the employment experience that people are looking for, and you can actually match with what people are looking for, when they're pursuing a career. So that's what I would say is make sure that when you attract those great candidates, keep reminding them of why they're there. Keep them reminding of the great things they're doing or achieving, so that they don't forget those great things. So thank you.
Thanks very much, James. Now our last presenter is Amy Kelly. Amy is the Director of Big Sky Relocations. So I'll just quickly share your screen, Amy.
Thanks, Jenny. Everyone can hear me, hopefully.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. And I'm really excited to be able to just have a chat about Big Sky Relocations and what we're doing with the PHN to address GP workforce sustainability in our glorious part of the world. So I'm the founder of Big Sky Relocations. I'm based in Tamworth, but I grew up on a wheat property just out of Ballata, which is in between Moree and Narrabri. Over the past 2 years, we've had the great privilege of providing relocation support services for a variety of businesses and organisations. And they include Tamworth Regional Council, a number of accountancy firms, an environmental engineering consultancy, and a business tech company. Plus, we've undertaken work for local GP practices and the Rural Doctors Network. We've also produced Welcome to Armidale and Welcome to Tamworth brochures on behalf of PHN for GP registrars, and we're just hooking into producing the same for Moree and Inverell. What we're up to. So we're really excited to be involved in the Bush GP grants and Welcome Investor programs, because they're actually perfect examples of proactive, creative strategies that are driven by locals on the ground. Because we live here too, and we're passionate about reliable, sustainable access to GP services in the bush. So the fundamental key to our services is to look at how we can improve the chance that each new hire will stick, and how we can enable them, and very importantly, if they've got a trailing spouse or a family, how do we get them to be invested and embedded in their new town and help them find their own local community really quickly and easily. So what we do is we look at each individual and their household and provide tailored, targeted local information and personal, practical, ongoing support. So for the Welcome Ambassador program, we've created a list of services that are designed not only to support your new doctor, but also to take the pressure off you, of the practice managers or the practice contact. It's usually their job to provide local information and recommendations or social introductions, and sometimes that requires a fair bit of hand-holding, which can be stressful and time-consuming. So now I'm here to drive that welcome wagon for you. So all our services start with a really comprehensive household survey. So we just conduct that over the phone, and that's a really deep dive investigation into all their interests and their needs, and really finding out all about them and what they're looking for in their new town. So we can offer them relocation home search assistance. So if the candidate is keen for that, we can take care of all that. So that's really that time-consuming job of ringing all the agents, searching through all the online properties, using local contacts to line for those private landlord options. So, and when rentals are hard to find, that could be really good support. Now, with the responses from the survey, we'll then put together a Kickstarter local life manual, which is specific to the individual household's needs and interests. It's designed to give them the best chance of jumping feet first into their new community. So depending on their circumstances, this might include daycare or school profiles and availabilities, reputable allied healthcare practitioners, opportunities for solo and team fitness, sport and recreation, a real investigation into hobbies or special interests and researching that locally, ideas for local after hours and weekend adventures, ways to discover the region, suitable religious, cultural, community and service organisations, local watering holes with the best atmosphere and regular social events to meet locals, dining options, the best local caffeine hits, plus we'd also like to really include information on the client's new practice. Also, we can design a self-drive tour of town, which will be a reflection of their survey responses, include all the essential local landmarking services, which will help them get their bearings quickly, which in turn reduces relocation anxiety, and they can really hit the ground running. Finally, we really understand, and we've seen that moving to a new town can be a bit daunting, and sometimes it helps to know someone has your back. So I'll be there in person to warmly welcome them when they arrive, making sure they have all the info and support they need to step confidently into their new regional living adventure. I'll then touch base with them regularly for the first 6 months to check if they need additional practical or logistical assistance. Plus, I'll also check in with the practice contact just to see if they think their new recruit might need a bit of extra support or a boost or social introduction, that kind of thing. I'm really looking forward to helping you welcome your new recruit and be part of their team so that they can get all the support they need to thrive in your town. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Amy. Mel, did you want to say anything else before we finish up? I'm sorry we've gone a little bit over time. We haven't had any questions come through yet. If anyone wants to type in any, now is your chance. But you can, of course, contact Mel directly over the next couple of days. And as I said earlier, we will have a copy of the presentation and the webinar up in our education library, like we normally do. And Mel will be emailing everybody tomorrow that's attended. Did you want to say anything else, Mel?
Oh, thanks, Jenny. Certainly not wanting to keep people from their evenings, but just wanted to say thanks for everyone attending. I think our presenters, gave us some really good information and tips. We know that taking on board that information has been successful in other regions, and we just really hope that everyone here tonight really takes advantage of the grants program and what we're offering. Particularly excited about the relocation assistance component as well. I think we'd all love to have Amy welcome us into a local town and show us all the best coffee spots. So yeah, please take advantage of the opportunity. Reach out to me as much as you need and we can talk through the process. And as Jenny said, there'll be some further information coming tomorrow. So thanks everyone, and have a great night.
Thanks everybody. Good night.